My sister Mallory and her lazy boyfriend Casey moved into my apartment while I was away. No warning, just took over. Used my equipment, trashed my stuff, and claimed family loyalty. So I kicked them out, changed the locks, and served them eviction papers. They still don't get why I'm pissed. When I first stepped into the apartment, I thought I had walked into the wrong unit. There were diapers on the kitchen counter. A bouncer seat sat in the middle of my minimalist living room, and my vintage travel posters had been replaced by a giant framed quote in soft cursive that read, "Family is everything." My name is Delilah. I'm 32 years old and I live, or used to live, in a studio apartment on the 23rd floor of a high-rise in Brooklyn. I'm a radio journalist. I had just come back from a month-long assignment in Alaska, following a research crew studying glacier melt. I was cold, tired, and all I wanted was my own bed and my tea cupboard. Instead, I opened the door and found my younger sister Mallory standing barefoot in my kitchen, bottle warming in one hand, her phone in the other, casually scrolling through what looked like Instagram DMs. "Oh my God, you're back early," she said like I had walked in on her life. "I thought you weren't coming until Friday." I didn't respond at first. I just looked around. My audio booth, custom built for recording high-quality radio spots, had been turned into a playpen. My condenser mic was missing. My bookshelf was half cleared, replaced with board books and a plastic giraffe that looked like it squeaked. "Where's my equipment?" I finally asked, though my voice came out too quiet to register as a proper question. "Oh, Casey's using it," she said, as if that explained everything. "He's recording demos for his new EP. You know, the DJ project I told you about." Casey, her boyfriend of 2 years. A guy with too many opinions on craft beer and exactly zero job stability. He emerged from behind the bedroom curtain, which was now a makeshift soundproofing wall, with my headphones around his neck and a baby carrier strapped to his chest. "Yo," he said like we were roommates. "The levels on your mic are sick. You really splurged, huh?" I didn't answer. I looked down and saw one of my favorite mugs, hand-painted in Morocco, being used as a pacifier holder. The tea cupboard? Half empty. The closet? Overstuffed with strollers, ring slings, and boxes labeled, "Baby Wipes Bulk." "Wait, are you mad?" Mallory asked, finally noticing I hadn't smiled or spoken much. "I'm just surprised," I said flatly. She exchanged a glance with Casey. "We figured it'd be okay since the place was empty and, well, we kinda had to leave ours." "That landlord is a psycho," Casey chimed in. "It's just temporary. I mean, we're family. That's what families do, right? Support each other." I nodded slowly, still taking it all in. I had no words, so I said nothing. Mallory walked over and grabbed my arm. "Del, look, we wouldn't have done this if we had another choice. We thought about asking Mom, but her building has stairs and it's just not baby-friendly. And honestly, your apartment is perfect. It's quiet, it's warm, and the energy here is just so nurturing." Nurturing? The word made me blink. "It's like a nest," Mallory said, eyes wide. "We made it into a family nest." I stood there for another moment, then nodded again. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I just went to the fridge, opened the door and took a picture of the inside. Then the counters. The floor. The mess in the bathroom. "What are you doing?" Casey asked. "Nothing," I said. "Just documenting." The truth was, I knew this wasn't an accident. This was a full-blown occupation. They had made themselves at home. My home. And now they were looking at me like I was the guest. Mallory softened her voice. "You've lived alone for years, Delilah. And now we're a family. Don't you think it's time this space served someone else?" I looked her in the eye but said nothing. "You don't have to say yes right now," she added quickly. "We're just hoping you'll see it from our side. I mean, we're raising a human being." Later that night, I sat in my car 3 blocks away, scrolling through photos of my apartment. My voice was calm, but my fingers trembled as I created a new folder in my phone titled Occupation. Evidence. Because this wasn't over. This was the start. Casey was lounging on my couch, barefoot and smug, when he made the comment that almost sent me over the edge. "We've actually improved the feng shui," he said, arms spread along the back of the cushions like he owned the place. "Moved your desk away from the window. The energy flows better now." I just stared at him. "We boxed up your stuff real careful though," he added quickly, pointing toward the corner, where several of my framed certificates, awards, and travel photos were stacked haphazardly in a torn cardboard box. "Didn't want anything getting dusty." Mallory sat cross-legged on the floor, burping the baby, as if none of this was wildly out of line. "You had so much clutter," she said without looking up. "We needed more open space for the baby to crawl eventually. You understand." The baby wasn't even sitting up yet. I glanced around again. My African masks were gone from the wall. My Nepalese wool rug rolled up and shoved behind the couch. My little personal history scrubbed clean in less than 4 weeks. You've lived alone for years, Delilah, Mallory said again like it was some sort of indictment. And we're a family. Don't you think that matters more? More than what? I asked even though I already knew where this was going. She gave a tired sigh like I was being dense on purpose. More than just having a space for yourself. You've had your time. I have a baby now. And a boyfriend who doesn't work, I muttered. Mallory looked up sharply. That's not fair. I'm not being fair, I said flatly. But apparently I'm supposed to be generous. You're supposed to be supportive, she said. We're not asking for the world, just some empathy. This is about family loyalty. That word again. Casey stood up, brushing chip crumbs off his sweatpants. Honestly, you're acting like a landlord, not a sister. I reached into my tote and pulled out a folder. I handed it to Mallory without a word. What's this? She asked, frowning. Legal documents, I said calmly. Lease agreement. Proof of ownership. Notice of unauthorized occupancy. Mallory didn't even open it. She handed it straight to Casey like it was a piece of trash. He chuckled. Legal jargon doesn't override moral obligation. Oh, I said, tilting my head. Is that in the Constitution? Mallory stood up, the baby fussing in her arms. You don't have to be cruel about it. I haven't said anything cruel, I replied, keeping my tone even. I've said very little, actually. That was the last conversation we had in my apartment. I left 20 minutes later with the documents still in my bag. No yelling. No threats. Just quiet steps back to the elevator. Because I wasn't going to fight them in the nest they'd claimed. I was going to dismantle it from the outside. That night I made 3 calls. First to my building's management office. Then to a real estate lawyer I'd worked with once during a podcast on housing fraud. And last, to a locksmith recommended by a friend who owed me a favor. By the time I hung up, I had a date circled in red on my calendar. And I slept better than I had in weeks. It was barely 7 a.m. when the locksmith arrived. A wiry guy named Lou with kind eyes and a battered toolbox. He didn't ask questions. Just nodded politely when I told him which unit and pulled out his drill. The hum of metal against metal was strangely soothing. Like the sound of order being restored. Inside, everything still smelled faintly like baby powder and leftover Thai food. I stepped over a tipped-over playmat and picked up my old headphones from the floor. Casey had left them plugged into his laptop, which was open on my coffee table, waveform files still on screen. I shut it gently. Lou finished in under 10 minutes. He handed me 2 fresh keys. Anyone else need a copy? He asked. No, I said. Just me. He smiled and nodded, then left without another word. I stood in the middle of the studio for a full minute, letting the silence wrap around me. No baby crying. No trap beats playing through my speakers. No one eating crackers in my bed. Just me. I unpacked my vinyls, sliding them back onto the shelf in alphabetical order. Nina Simone. Cat Power. Some rare jazz LP I bought in Prague. I reattached the mic to its original mount in the sound booth. Ran a cable check. The levels were off but nothing I couldn't fix. By the time the tea kettle whistled, I had reset the presets on my mixer and started reorganizing my bookshelf. Half of the titles were missing. Probably boxed up or shoved into storage bins I hadn't approved, but I didn't care. This was mine again. At 9:42 a.m. the banging started. Casey. Fist slamming on the door like a man being denied entrance to his own home. Delilah. You can't just do this. Open the goddamn door. I sipped my tea. You changed the locks? Are you kidding me right now? We have a baby. More pounding. You're heartless. This is psychotic. My phone lit up with voicemails. Then texts. Then DMs. One from Mallory read. The baby is crying in confusion. The energy in the apartment is off. Please let us in. I turned the phone over, screen down. That afternoon, my lawyer sent the eviction notice via certified mail and email. I added a cover letter. Effective immediately. Vacate within 72 hours. All personal belongings must be collected via appointment only. Do not return unannounced. Mallory's reply came within 20 minutes. Wow, so this is who you've become. You can't even make room for your own niece. I didn't respond. I blocked her number. Then Casey's. Then the shared account they'd made for the baby's photo updates. At 4:03 p.m., I stood at the window looking out over Brooklyn. The afternoon sun hit the building across the street just right, glowing orange and clean. The city buzzed below, but my apartment finally was still. And that's when I knew, this wasn't revenge. It was restoration. This was me putting the pieces of my life back exactly where they belonged. One lock at a time. It was our mother's idea, of course. A Sunday brunch to discuss things like adults, she said, as if the last 3 weeks hadn't been filled with voicemail guilt trips and legal threats disguised as family texts. Still, I agreed. I figured if nothing else, I'd get a free latte and a side of passive aggression. The place she picked was exactly her vibe: light wood floors, succulent centerpieces, waiters in denim aprons, and a full vegan quiche menu. I arrived 5 minutes early because, unlike everyone else in my family, I value punctuality. She was already there, sipping chamomile tea with a nervous smile and flipping through the specials like she hadn't already memorized them online. "Thanks for coming, sweetheart," she said. "I'm not here to fight," I told her, sliding into the booth. She nodded. "Good. Me neither." Then Mallory showed up. Not even 2 minutes later, striding in like she was walking onto a talk show set. Casey wasn't with her, thankfully, but she was pushing the stroller with dramatic flair and wearing oversized sunglasses indoors. She didn't look at me as she slid in next to Mom. "Oh," I said. "So this is a summit." Mom cleared her throat. "We just thought it'd be better to talk all together." I looked at Mallory. "You're not supposed to be here." "And yet," she said, shrugging. "Here I am." The waiter came by. I ordered black coffee. Mallory got a green juice. Mom ordered something with turmeric and oat milk. "So," Mallory said brightly, "I guess this is your chance to explain why you're so unforgiving." I blinked. "Excuse me. You've always had this cold streak," she continued. "It's like you care more about your space and your stuff than about actual people. Than about your family." I almost laughed. "You squatted in my apartment." "We lived there," she corrected. "Because we had nowhere else to go. Because we're a family and families help each other." Mom reached over, patting my hand like I was the one who needed calming down. "No one's saying you were wrong to feel upset," she said softly. "But maybe the way you handled it was a little harsh." I pulled my hand back. "You mean legally?" Mom flinched. "Sweetheart." The baby was confused. Mallory said she cried for 2 nights straight after being removed from the space. "I'm sorry the baby was confused," I said. "But you know what's confusing? Coming home to find your life erased and being told you don't get to be angry about it." Mallory's eyes welled up and I knew what was coming before she opened her mouth. "I just wanted her to grow up knowing her aunt," she said, her voice trembling. "I guess I was wrong to think you wanted that too." There it was, the dagger dipped in sentiment. "You wanted her to know me from a place you took without asking," I said. "You wanted me to co-parent your mistakes without being asked. You didn't want a sister. You wanted a resource." Mallory started crying harder. Mom shifted uncomfortably. "You're being cruel," she whispered. "No," I said, steady. "I'm being clear. There's a difference." We sat in silence for a long minute. Then I stood. "I have to go," I said. "I've got interviews to prep for. Some of us still have jobs." I walked out before they could guilt me again. Before the baby could wake up and be used as another talking point. Outside, the wind hit my face and I exhaled. There was no peace in that brunch. But there was clarity. And that was enough for now. I didn't text them back. Not after the brunch. Not after Mallory's third weepy voicemail or Mom's attempt at reconciliation masked as a recipe I thought you'd like. I let everything go quiet. I left their messages unread, their calls unanswered, their guilt untouched. Instead, I did what I always do when the noise in my life gets too loud. I turned to the radio. There's a studio in Midtown I occasionally freelance for. Quiet hours, late nights, no questions asked. I used to use this space for experimental projects, mock episodes, the kind of passion work that didn't fit into my usual assignments. That week, I booked 3 midnight sessions back-to-back under my pseudonym, a voice named June. I wrote a monologue. A single, unbroken story. Not about me, at least not directly. Just a voice, talking late into the night, about boundaries and betrayal. About how some wounds were matching faces. About what it feels like to come second in the house you grew up in. I didn't name names. Didn't use real locations. But the pain? That was real. I ended the segment with a question. How do you know if it's justice you want, or just to be chosen for once? That line just came out of me unplanned. But the moment I said it, something shifted. My chest felt hollow. Like the echo of something I hadn't allowed myself to feel until then. The next day, the station aired it on their late-night experimental slot. I didn't promote it, didn't even tell the regulars. But somehow it got picked up. Listeners started calling in before the episode even finished. The first few were kind. "Thank you for saying what so many of us feel but can't explain." That line about being chosen? That hit me like a brick. Then came the others. "You sound bitter. Cold. Maybe they didn't choose you because you shut everyone out. So you shut the door. Congratulations. What now? Who's left to love you on the other side?" One call in particular stopped me. It was a woman, probably in her 40s, voice like gravel and wine. "You didn't want peace. You didn't want fairness. You wanted someone to pick you first. You just didn't know how to ask. The producer played it for me later. I asked him to repeat it twice. Because the thing is, she was right. I didn't realize it at the time, not when I changed the locks or served the papers or walked out of that brunch like I had nothing left to prove. But deep down, somewhere under the calm in the strategy, I wanted someone, anyone, to say you matter more than this mess. We pick you. And no one ever did. That night, I walked home in the rain without an umbrella. Let it soak me. Didn't bother checking my phone. I knew the notifications were piling up again. People telling me they'd heard the broadcast. Asking if it was about Mallory. About the apartment. About me. I didn't answer. Not yet. I wasn't done listening. I hadn't thought about my grandmother in a long time. Not really. Not the way I used to when I'd sit at her kitchen table in Queens, eating lemon cookies and listening to her stories about radio dramas from the 1940s. She's the one who got me hooked on sound, on words, on telling stories that make people lean closer. But that week, after the broadcast went live and the voicemails piled up again, I found myself digging through a box I hadn't touched since she passed. Inside were my old journals. Spiral-bound, messy, the kind of thing you'd think twice about reading if you were anyone else. And tucked beneath them, a flash drive labeled in her handwriting, Delilah's first tapes. I plugged it into my laptop and put on my headphones. Her voice came through soft, a little crackly, like the mic had been half covered by a sweater sleeve. If you're hearing this, it means I'm probably gone. Or maybe you're just curious and nosy. Either way, hello, baby girl. I smiled. I hadn't realized how much I missed her until that moment. I hope you're still telling stories. I hope you never let anyone make you feel small for needing space. I hope, more than anything, you know that this place is yours. Not just the apartment. The world inside your head. You built yourself in it. No one gave you that. I paused the audio. Just for a second. Because something twisted in my chest. See, the apartment wasn't just my home, it was my inheritance. Legally and emotionally. My grandmother had left it to me in her will. She'd even helped me put together the down payment when I was 23, back when I was still stringing together freelance gigs and sleeping on an air mattress. She believed in me long before anyone else did. Mallory didn't know that. Or maybe she forgot. Maybe she thought she could just move in and the history would rearrange itself to fit her convenience. I sat on the floor and flipped open the top journal in the box. Inside, a short entry from a Thanksgiving years ago. Mallory dropped her plate and Mom yelled at me for making her anxious. I was literally sitting there. Silent. I always get in trouble for her mistakes. There were others. Mallory took my sweater again. Said it looked better on her. Mom laughed. She skipped school. I covered for her. She cried when I didn't. Casey borrowed my mixer last year and never returned it. Mallory said I should be honored they want to use my stuff. I flipped faster now. The evidence wasn't just recent. It was embedded. This wasn't about an apartment. It wasn't about rent or space or family loyalty. It was about a pattern, one where Mallory always came first. Where I was expected to accommodate, forgive, and disappear. I thought about the brunch. About how easily Mom slid into old habits, comforting Mallory first, patting my hand like I was the unstable one. About the phone calls afterward, all of them reminding me how harsh I'd been, how icy I sounded. They never said Mallory was wrong. Just that I should have been kinder. Because I was the one who didn't cry. Because I was the one who walked away instead of breaking down. I played the audio again. The home is yours because you built yourself in it. I closed my eyes and let her voice fill the space. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not triumph. Just recognition. I wasn't the backup daughter. I was the one who stayed standing. And from here on out, I wasn't shrinking to make room for anyone. I wrote the post at 2:13 a.m., sitting cross-legged on the hardwood floor of my apartment with a mug of lukewarm tea beside me and the window cracked just enough to let in the late spring chill. It wasn't a rant. It wasn't even a story, really. Just a question. If someone burns a bridge but leaves a trail of breadcrumbs behind, is that an invitation to rebuild or a trap? Should I rebuild a bridge or burn it forever? Posted under my pseudonym, of course, a voice named June. By now the audience had grown. Thousands followed the account, most without knowing who I really was. The anonymity gave me freedom. Honesty. Within minutes, comments poured in. Sometimes burning the bridge is how you light the way. Rebuild it. But with guardrails this time. Only you know if they'd walk across to meet you halfway, or just to take more. I refreshed again and again, watching strangers unpack my pain like it belonged to them. But it didn't bother me. That's what storytelling is, really. Holding out your wounds and letting someone else find their own reflection in them. And then, buried between a bunch of generic replies, was a DM. From Mallory. He left. 2 words. No punctuation. No context. 10 seconds later, another. Casey's gone. Took his stuff and left a note that said he wasn't built for domesticity. I'm alone. I don't know what to do. And then, we're both hurting. Does that matter to you? I read it 3 times. Does that matter to you? That's the thing about Mallory. She knows how to twist the knife just enough to make it look like a handshake. There was guilt tucked into every syllable. A silent dare. Are you really going to leave me like this, now that I'm finally not okay? I didn't reply. I didn't even type out a draft response. Instead, I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I opened my settings and tapped log out. Another tap, delete account. A pause. Then confirm. The screen went blank. No more comments. No more DMs. No more second-guessing if telling my story meant keeping a tether to the people who caused it. I shut my laptop, stood up, and stretched. The mug of tea had gone cold. I dumped it in the sink without a second thought. Mallory could mourn the life she had. But I wasn't going to be her reset button. Not again. I chose silence. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I finally understood I didn't owe anyone the sound of me breaking. 3 weeks later, the apartment finally felt like mine again. Not just in the physical sense, the throw pillows back on the couch, the records sorted, the framed photos of my travels lining the shelf again, but in the way the silence sat, calm and settled, like it belonged here. There were no more baby bottles in the sink. No more lo-fi beats bleeding from Casey's laptop. No more toys in the hallway to trip over at night. Just me. I'd started a new podcast project, Inheritance, What We Carry and What We Leave Behind. The name came to me while I was reorganizing the closet and found an old receipt with my grandmother's handwriting on the back. She used to write grocery lists on anything within reach, post-its, bills, even napkins. This one said, "You don't owe them your peace. Only your presence, and even that you can choose." So I chose. The pilot episode was called The Backup Daughter. It was raw. Honest. I spoke about roles we don't audition for but get cast in anyway. About what it's like to always be the strong one, the stable one, the one expected to stay quiet while everyone else makes noise. I recorded it in one take. The next day, I got a call from Nathan, an old producer I hadn't worked with in years. "I heard the episode," he said. "It's good. Really good. You thinking of turning this into a full series?" "Maybe," I said. "Just testing the waters." "Well," he said, "if you want syndication, I know a few folks who'd be interested. Think about it." I hung up and sat still for a long time. I wasn't used to being heard like that. Not professionally, not personally. But something had shifted. People weren't just listening now, they were hearing me. Outside my window, the city buzzed, car horns, dogs barking down below, music drifting from someone's rooftop. But inside there was stillness. I lit a candle. Put on a Nina Simone record. Brewed a fresh pot of jasmine tea. Peace used to feel like a luxury. Something earned. Delayed. Conditional on other people finally deciding I'd done enough. Now it felt like a room I had unlocked from the inside. Mallory hadn't contacted me since her last DM. No new messages. No emails. Just silence. And that was fine. Some things don't need a final word. They just need an ending. I walked slowly through the apartment that night, touching the edge of the desk I built, running my fingers along the audio booth walls I had once patted by hand. I looked at the plant by the window, somehow still alive despite a month of neglect. Even it was starting over. Everything in this space had my fingerprints on it. Not because I fought for it, but because I created it. And for the first time in my adult life I felt whole. Not chosen. Not forgiven. Just free.